What did they need? It was about
11 point. They need 12, 11.9.
Yeah,
But that's overall.
Exactly.
That is,
this is overall.
when you look at it that way, you really are talking hung parliament.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work out that way because the swings are never even.
Because of where the swings lie. It's still looking to me like this is going to settle on about 45 LNP seats.
Kate Jones has declared victory, by the way, in Ashgrove.
She should have been watching, David. We told her that 3 hours ago.
She says it sends a clear message that the community wants a better way going forward.
Well, it'll be interesting, David, to see what that better way forward is. You're going to see a Labor government or if they got in, a Labor government that would have still $70+ billion worth of debt, no asset leasing or sales. It's going to be great to see how a Labor government, if they formed one, is going to deal with the massive debt they've left behind, because there hasn't been a Labor government in my adult lifetime that's been able to deal with this. It's beyond them.
And it's looking less and less likely, we've got to say, because if you're right that the Katter party in the end would not go with Labor, the only way Labor forms a government is if they get to 44 seats and get Peter Wellington on board.
Yeah. I've got to say, I think Mundingburra is looking increasingly gone for the LNP. I think that will be a Labor gain. It's tight, but it's now looking to me as if it's over the line. Labor are a lot more confident now than they were an hour ago.
Well, they need that one.
I think they've got it.
Labor can still get to 45, but I suspect they're more likely to get to 43, 42.
Well then, unless they can get the Katter party on board, there won't be a minority Labor government.
And there's no other surprise crossbench victories that could pop up in the seats that are left over.
No, because Douglas has lost in Gave and
Pauline Hanson's
Hopper has
slipping
lost in
back.
Nanango. An independent wasn't elected in to replace Liz Cunningham.
But what kind of government does the LNP in Queensland become if they need to be held hostage to the Katter party?
Yeah. What does it mean for state asset privatisations? What does it mean for coal seam gas development? I mean, they're two core issues for the Katter party during this campaign.
It's 45-44. Remember, you're only a heart attack away from a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look, not to discount what Craig said earlier, the ALP can still win. There's no doubt about that.
They can get to 45.
They can get to 45. They could even get to 46. You look at Mansfield, Mundingburra, PUMICESTONE, Whitsunday. I think we're in front of Whitsunday. But if you take an optimistic view, a really optimistic view, Labor could get to 47. It's not impossible. It's unlikely. But David, as we said earlier, because you don't know what percentage of preferences exhaust, you're actually not going to know the result for a number of days.
Yeah, we'll take a quick break. Back with more. Do stay with us. Right, mate.
For live coverage, this is
Very, very tough.
Good evening. We continue our coverage of the Queensland election night. It's been, an incredibly good night for Labor, far better than many, including those in Labor, predicted. They are still within a chance of forming government, but most likely a minority government. We're not going to know. Tonight seems to be the general consensus. The LNP, however, we do know have had a shocking night. From a record win 3 years ago, they've lost heavily tonight. Yes, they can still, if the final seats in doubt go their way, form a government. They've lost their premier, though. Campbell Newman, in his own seat of Ashgrove, has gone down with a swing of around 9%. In that seat, his opponent, Kate Jones, has declared victory. Have a look at the front page of the Sunday Mail for tomorrow in Queensland. Giant killer, and a photo there of Kate Jones. Premier dumped as voters savage the LNP. It points out that Campbell Newman's political career appeared over after a massive swing against the government. Well, it certainly does appear over. He serves one term in the Queensland Parliament. Quite extraordinary, Peter Van Onselen.
Oh, unbelievable.
One term as Premier, and that's it.
Look, at one level he was brave, crazy brave. Perhaps there was a little bit of that arrogance thrown in with not being prepared to change seats. He was bold in what he chose to do for the economy, which I think, broadly speaking, has worked. He was even bolder with what he announced that he would plan to do if he was in a position to win the election. That looks like, whether he's right or wrong in those asset sales decisions, that looks like being a key factor in why certainly he lost his seat, but perhaps also a key factor, no doubt, in why they may well lose government if they do.
OK, but if, George Brandis, your view is that this was state issues, not federal issues at play.
Well, that's your view too, David.
Yeah,
I mean, you said so during the campaign.
How then does Campbell Newman go from that record-winning position 3 years ago to potentially losing government and definitely losing his own seat?
Well, at this point, I'm going to leave the commentary to you, David. No doubt there'll be a lot of soul-searching within the LNP. There'll be a consideration of the campaign. There'll be some consideration of the way issues were handled over the last 3 years. But I agree with Peter Van Onselen that what I think you're trying to say, Peter, is that basically Campbell Newman was taking Queensland in the right direction.
But
he certainly was.
Something's gone wrong here. I mean, hello, something's gone wrong. If everything he's doing was right, he'd be Premier, they'd be in government.
Perhaps the pace of change was faster than people were prepared to accept.
Also, the pre-election, he wasn't open pre-election to what he ended up doing, even though I think a lot of what he did was right. He tried to then rectify that by being open about what he planned to do if he won this election, much more so. And that probably became a bit of a double whammy for him. But I just think state issues were the key to this election campaign. No question. But I think you are undercooking. When it's this close, you have to say, even if only 1 in 100 voters voted on a federal issue, that is the reason that Campbell Newman lost, right there.
Well, Bill Shorten
that's...
visited Queensland on 11 occasions. 11 occasions. Tony Abbott wasn't allowed.
It's just simple maths. If it's 1 in...
say that there are no federal implications when the state party actively discourages Tony Abbott.
The Sky audience is a very knowledgeable audience. Don't try and tell us that Billy won some votes for your mob up there in Queensland.
Well, I love the arrogance that you're displaying. I mean,
but you know Billy's no good. I know he's no good.
I'm not sure Bill Shorten won votes, but I certainly think that Tony Abbott lost votes.
The Liberal Party in Victoria, and
let's stick on the
Michael,
state vote.
Nothing to see
Put federal
here,
factors
no
to one side.
implications.
Put federal factors to one side. I'm just trying to tease out what went wrong at a state level for Campbell Newman. Michael Kroger.
Okay, I'll tell you what I think is the biggest issue in Australian politics today, and that's job security. I think Australians intuitively know, with the collapse of the mineral prices, that dramatically lowers Australian revenue because you don't get the prices, you don't get the taxation, etc. I think with the closing of the car manufacturing sector 10 years ago to now, the gradual decline in the TCF sector, textile, clothing, footwear, the decline in the manufacturing sector, I think Australians are intuitively very, very worried about job security for themselves and their kids. And I think if you say after an election, not before, but after, 12,000 public servant jobs are going, I think that upsets the electorate dramatically. They were shocked by it. Labor exploited it brilliantly. I think there's a lesson in that.
And that's where the rot set in very early on. That's where the rot set in. And I think there's a lesson in that, which is if you're going to cut public sector jobs, then it has to be done by attrition rather than by a mass sector.
Although in fairness, Michael, it should be pointed out that almost all of those public sector redundancies were voluntary redundancies.
Yeah, even though it's 12,000 people have lost their job. And this plays a bit into the Victorian political scene now because we've got Daniel Andrews, who's the Labor leader, the Premier. He's cancelling for the first time that we can remember, a lawful contract entered into between the Victorian government and a consortium to build this East Link list, this massive infrastructure development.
But not without a mandate, though.
Exactly, correct. But what's going to happen is you're going to see lots of jobs which were going to be created, which are now not going to be. This will play out very badly for him. It'll play out badly for Labor in Victoria. It's the same point.
Unless you can get other projects going.
Yeah, but if there's thousands of jobs there to be looked at, and you just wipe them out with a stroke of the pen, the electorate will take a very dim view of that, as they did to Campbell Newman here, unfortunately.
Kieran Gilbert is at the LNP headquarters. Kieran, what's happening there now?
Yeah, well, David, not a lot. There've been very few cheers. I think there was one cheer for a safe seat. So, yeah, not a great mood as you'd expect tonight, although there is still the chance that they can form minority government, possibly an outside chance of majority government. I just wanted to read to you a message I received from a federal, an Abbott government minister, just in the context of what was being discussed a bit earlier. In the wake of this result, this is what was sent to me. Tony Abbott is unfortunately finished. Only discussion is when, and I think there's a chance it's sooner rather than later. I had another backbencher phone a bit earlier and say, wait for the onslaught from Queensland MPs. They are ready to blow up, federally that is, in terms of the federal government performance here as well. So you can debate as much as you like about the federal implications in this result. You can rest assured there will be ongoing ramifications for the Prime Minister, according to the feedback I'm receiving tonight.
Yeah, we're getting a little, I think PBI and I are getting a similar sort of feedback as well coming through.
I'm being told that without question there is going to be federal blowback out of Queensland, including from federal Liberals out of Queensland.
Expect there will be?
Well, if people are saying that they are going to agitate the issue in the party room, no doubt they will. We've got a free and open forum in the party room. It's beyond doubt that this will be discussed in the party room, as it should be.
But it's much more than a discussion.
I do caution against over-interpreting what a number of anonymous individuals might be saying, because there are 102 people in our party room. And as I said to Craig Emerson much earlier in the night, this isn't the sort of tribal warfare that we saw during the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd government. Every significant person in the Liberal Party, whether in the Cabinet, in the party organisation, is behind Tony Abbott and does not want to see a change.
Well, George has just described all of those who are against him as insignificant.
Well, I'm saying every senior person.
No, you know what he's saying. And when you were there, you know, any number of members of the Cabinet were opposed to Rudd or Gillard. You know, we've seen this in the past. I've seen leadership change in the Liberal Party when Andrew Peacock and John Howard were there. They both had very senior people on both sides. In Tony Abbott's case, you know, are there senior people in the Cabinet opposed to him canvassing publicly for the leadership? I think quite the opposite. So if you see what Samantha Maiden's written tomorrow, quite the opposite. Obviously, backbenchers are extremely disappointed with the sales job over the last few months, obviously, and so are the public. That's why it's 43-57. But, you know, that's a long way from saying anything else.
But you've got to remember this, though. You expect the front bench to be in behind the leader.
Well, that's not what happened during the Labor
weren't
period.
under his...
No, well, and that is true, but that was an unusually divided government. This front bench wants Tony Abbott to succeed. Even those that are starting to, at least in my case, talk to journalists and have doubts about whether he will. But the only reminder is this. The front bench, well, would they be talking to me if I suddenly outed them? But this is the important thing. This is not a front bench or a top-down led revolt or question. This is the Socceroos have scored.
Socceroos have
That's
scored
more important than anything.
2-1. They haven't finished that extra time, but they're ahead. Thank God.
Just quickly on this though, this is not a top-down revolt. The beginnings of this is a bottom-up one, and there are a lot more backbenchers than front benchers.
Well, there's no doubt that there are some backbenchers who've been briefing journalists. Backbenchers who are doing that basically are engaged in an act of self-harm, because every time this story gets run in the media, then that's another day lost.
But what are they to do? What are they to do
to the government?
What are they to do if
the captain says that it's because of him that the good performers around him are performing well?
The problem is, you know, the leader and those around him, and that's why we're in such trouble and going backwards and backwards and backwards. What are they to do?
Tony has run an extremely inclusive operation. Nobody is... The party room is an extraordinarily free and open forum, and people do take advantage of that.
But so is the ERC, George Brandis. I mean, the ERC has leaked, Cabinet has leaked. We know, I was told directly that the SPCR Mona decision, Scott Morrison didn't agree with it in Cabinet. He complained about that at the following Cabinet meeting, and then I got told that by a different Cabinet Minister. Sam Maiden had the ERC leak.
Who's telling you those things,
the issue here, keep my mobile away from you. The issue here is very much...
Someone's just rung you.
Oh my God. Safer on the side where David Spears is. The issue here is very much that there is a level of dissatisfaction that reminds me of that against Malcolm Turnbull. From the backbench, and all the front benches were saying it's only one or two rogue backbenchers. Well, it wasn't. It was dozens, and it's dozens.
But a couple of differences here, Peter. First of all, we're in opposition. To bring down an opposition leader is not the same big deal as bringing down a Prime Minister. Secondly, we didn't have the experience in 2009 of seeing the act of political evisceration that the ALP subsequently committed upon themselves in 2010 by cutting down an elected Prime Minister, and nobody in their right mind...
Liberals want him to succeed and they want to give him time.
That's the third point I was about to make. Everyone wants Tony to succeed. Maybe a few backbenchers in the Liberal Party. Maybe a few backbenchers are chattering, stirring the pot, speaking to journalists like you and others. As I said before, I think that is an act of self-harm. But structurally, this government is solid and united. The Cabinet, even if there have been leaks, the Cabinet is united to a person behind Tony Abbott. All of the Liberal Party organisational chiefs and tribal leaders, if you will, are united behind Tony Abbott. There isn't the structural fracturing that we saw during the period of the Labor government. Sorry, Craig, but the last point I'd make to you is this: when the opinion polls are looking unfavourable, of course people start to chatter because there's nervousness. Of course they start to chatter. Don't misinterpret that as being a fundamental structural division in the government, because it's not.
It's
let me
no
come
doubt.
back to Craig Emerson more on that. In the meantime, I think it is half-time in the extra time at the soccer Luke Doherty's there at ANZ Stadium. Aussies back on top.
Yeah, much more buoyant mood than when we spoke about 15 minutes ago, David. The Aussies, they have hit the front once again. It looked like those demons of 4 years ago where they lost the Asian Cup final to Japan with a goal in extra time. Were raising their head once again, but James Troisi has popped up with the goal for the Socceroos just before half-time in the first period of extra time. It put the Aussies 2-1 up. Some fantastic work from the Western Sydney Wanderers striker as well, Tommy Urish, to wriggle into some space and get the shot away before James Troisi slammed home the rebound from the keeper. It followed up from a great strike from Massimo Luongo in the first half to give the Aussies the lead, and then that crushing blow at the time, a 91st minute equaliser to South Korea, which sent this fixture into extra time. But James Troisi, two members, Massimo Luongo and James Troisi, could be rising to write their names into Australian football folklore tonight. Members of Generation Next taking their place in current day. An amazing story and developing rather here at the Sydney Olympic Stadium.
Keepers posted, Luke Doherty. Thank you very much for that. Let's actually talk about what's happening in Queensland as the count continues.
You're going to give me a go before you
very
decide
quickly, very quickly.
Well, thanks for the tolerance.
Your insights on what's happening in the Abbott cabinet, I'm sure, are
No,
somewhat limited.
I wasn't even going to comment on that.
Okay.
Right. I was going to say that I agree with George that destabilising a leader is not the right thing to do, and it is not productive. However, I will confide in you some research that we had, qualitative polling, before the last election, which said this: we want to vote Labor out and the Liberal Party in. When people pointed out that Tony Abbott was the leader, the soft voters said, yeah, but they'll get rid of him. Now, I'm just reporting it as a fact. It was a very strong message coming through our polling, non-committed voters or soft voters, that they actually believed that the Liberal Party would get rid of Tony Abbott. I'm saying, I agree with George, that destabilisation doesn't get you anywhere, and Labor proved it.
All right. Let's talk, Richard, quickly. Do we want to get back to Queensland?
Well, I want to talk about Queensland rather than this. And all I can say is I agree with George. I think that Abbott will stay there. I think it's highly unlikely he'll get knocked off. And as I said in my column on Friday, the Labor lapsed Catholics are scrambling for the front pews to make sure they pray for that outcome. Now, getting on to, however, Queensland, what we really haven't talked about, I think Alan Jones has had a big influence on this. Now, when the campaign began, Labor was very concerned about its Brisbane vote. It knew that, Cairns and Townsville and these places, the vote was very strong. It didn't think it was as strong in Brisbane. Tonight, Brisbane has been sensational. And I think Alan Jones he's come in, he's in that 1 hour every day. He's got massive publicity. And I think Newman was really stupid to sue him because that gave it much more publicity and you relive the horror more. I think Alan Jones has had a very big influence on this outcome.
I'll go further than that. If Labor wins, they won because of Alan Jones.
Yeah. Look, David, I have to say I agree with that completely with what Graham has said. Suing Alan Jones was a major error. As Graham said, it escalated at a couple of days. It escalated his level of anger. Jones has a massive following in Queensland. This was a strategic error to take on someone who's regarded by many as a friend of the Liberal National Party. So here he is, the most successful broadcaster in Australia, the most listened to, attacking viciously every day the Newman government. This caused them immense damage. He's played a very major role in this, and it was a mistake to deal with Jones in the way in which the coalition, the government did in Queensland?
Well, I agree that Alan Jones did have a big impact. I actually listened to his broadcasts most mornings for a whole hour during drive time between 8 and 9 a.m. Alan Jones poured forth a diatribe against Campbell Newman and his government. It was the best political advertising the Labor Party got in the entire election campaign. A 1 hour long diatribe for 9 consecutive days in the last fortnight of the election. So I agree entirely that he had a big impact.
Now look,
I've tried to sign him up, you know, but he won't do it.
He attacked
He's already committed.
He attacked Rudd and Gillard in New South Wales relentlessly, and the Liberal National Party were the great beneficiary of that before the 13 election. So he goes both sides from time to time, and he's done the Liberal National Party immense damage, and what George Brandis has said is correct. I heard a couple of those broadcasts. They were were very damaging.
No, he didn't miss. Let's check what the state of play is. Let's have a look at the statewide vote now, and then we'll get to some of the seats we're still waiting to see an outcome in. Statewide, the swing was looking, when last we checked, at around 8.8%. Now, this is the primary vote. You can see 40.2%. That hasn't moved much in the last half hour or so for the LNP, 38.6%. Labor, 8.5% for the Greens. Take a look at what the swing is. We now got 63.2% of the vote counted, and it is much the same. An 8.8% swing against. 11.6% swing to Labor. That's crept up a touch, I think, in the last half hour, and but it's probably just come off the Greens there, which were a little bit higher than the 1.1% they are now. Can we bring up the seats that have changed hands? The LNP losses tonight, because there haven't been any Labor losses, of course. Now, this is the list of seats that have gone from the LNP to the Labor column, in alphabetical order here, not in order of the swing. But you can see this list goes on and on. There's a page of 5, another page of 5. And I think at the moment we're looking at...
15, 20.
It's 25.
5. 29.
29.
And it's more than that.
And it's going to be more than that. Now, the seats that we are still waiting to see, well, there are 4 in particular, Peter Van Onselen, that we probably aren't going to know tonight, but let's take a look at Mansfield. Mansfield, if we can bring that up, we've now got nearly 60% of the vote counted there.
Yeah,
now,
too close.
Yeah, that's a 7.6% swing, but you put that 41.4% vote for Labor with a fair chunk of the 9.9% that the Greens have got.
It's too close to call. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But you'd have to say that the LNP, I would argue, are slightly ahead.
Yep. Campbell Newman, by the way, I'm told, is about 10 or 15 minutes away from talking. We'll go live there when he does. And it's not going to be an easy speech. Maryborough, let's have a look at Maryborough. And this one is another that's going to be too close to call tonight. Got a similar amount counted, nearly 60%.
See, that's too close to call, but on that one, I think that the Labor Party are ahead of the Liberal Party.
Sorry, you think Labor...
Well, but it also depends.
Oh, of course.
Whether Foley picks up any preferences. Don't overlook Foley, the independent, who's the former independent member, who was defeated by Madden at the 2012 election. Now he's only about 3% behind.
Let's take a look at Whitsunday as well. LNP were looking better there, I think, last time we checked, but now we've got 65% of the vote counted.
On this one, you would have to say that the Liberal Party are looking better than Labor.
Yeah. Again,
although Labor has come back.
I just don't agree with that.
Labor has
This is the
come
one
back
we
on this.
repeatedly are giving
This is very tight.
to the LNP.
But the Labor Party have come back on that, actually, looking at, with more of the votes counted,
Well, they're
that looks like it's
5.2%
shifting back in
behind.
Labor's direction.
They're 5.2% behind.
You know what?
There are only 6.5% of Green votes.
Yeah, well, there's 12.5% PUP votes.
where are they going?
And they are directing against the Liberal.
LNP everywhere.
But you don't know how many of those will
No, you
exhaust,
don't.
and you don't know which way they'll
hang
go.
on, but
And the other thing you don't know,
just a minute, there's 18% of votes out there still to be counted. Let's say 9% come out. They're going to come against you very heavily. That'll put Labor over the line.
And Richo,
And postals will go the other way. It's too close to
Too
call.
close to call.
I spent a day in Whitsunday last Tuesday. The other thing you don't know is how many of the booths the PUP party will have manned in Whitsunday.
Yeah.
Well, they've got a lot of votes.
But just to be clear, Labor can still get to a majority just. I don't think they will.
It's unlikely.
But they can.
Palmerston, let's have a look
agree
at that. Let's bring up Palmerston. And the margin, okay, we're getting that now. The margin going
This is
into
looking
tonight
pretty
was
good for
12%.
Labor.
Labor will win that, I reckon.
Yeah.
You can almost take that off the list now. Labor's got that. Do you agree, Graham?
I think it's going to be very hard for the Libs to win that one. I mean, it's still possible, but you'd have to say odds. Labor's in front.
The Liberal needs to be 500. The Liberal.
This is why Labor's looking like it's getting potentially to that majority.
Liberal needs to be 500 to 800 votes
Welcome
ahead.
aboard.
I'm not aboard.
No, I'm not either. I'm just
And
saying.
neither am I, even though he's
People
welcoming
think.
us.
I want to take a look at Lockyer as well, if we can. This is the Pauline Hanson, well, the seat she's been contesting.
See, she's coming back in
Yeah,
this.
that's what I'm just hearing. So let's have a look. We've got 72% counted now, and she's got 27.7% of the vote. So who does she pick votes up from?
Cat.
And
Well, if she gets all the
not there.
preferences and they're all distributed, then she jumps ahead of Rickus, but that's
I
unlikely.
still think the Libs will get home on that one, particularly if you
agree.
factor in the postals. The postals you would think will lift the Libs.
And look, you'd have to say, Peter, you'd have to say that some of the ALP preferences might go to
the Liberals.
Might go to
If I was voting in that electorate, I would be preferencing the Liberals.
And keep in mind, she will get virtually no postal votes.
Yeah.
she's done better than, well, I thought she
She
did.
has.
You know, much better than I thought she'd do. I think it's a great credit to her, but I still don't think she'll get there.
She'll get a nice check from the electorate.
She'll
I
come
would
very
never
close,
feel
though.
good if I lost a seat or lost an election, and if she loses an election, it might be a mighty fine effort, but it's another loss for Pauline Hanson.
But she's an experienced loser.
Queensland is a lucky you don't have an upper house, or she'd be in there.
She ran as
when
a-
she was on a Liberal
a
had a vote
Liberal,
card.
yeah, exactly.
Only time she was ever elected was on a Liberal had a vote card because they didn't have time to withdraw it.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, though, if Queensland had an upper house, she would be a permanent member
well,
of it.
if my brother's uncle was my auntie,
the Labor Party.
But it's not the most unusual thing to put forward. You're the only state in the Commonwealth
it's
without
all
one.
Labor's fault.
Well, it's the Labor,
not an upper house.
It's the Labor government of 1922
I was
abolished the
waiting
upper
for
house.
it. It was all Labor's fault.
Well,
It started in
a
22.
Labor government abolished the upper house in 1922.
Shocking, yeah.
It was opposed by the then Conservative
And your
opposition.
point is?
My point is, it's entirely the Labor Party's fault there's not an upper house because the
all Labor
Labor
fault.
Party abolished it.
Can we
Wasn't
look at
the,
Mount,
Would you like to see
Ommaney?
the upper house come back?
Mount Ommaney?
I don't want to open that
Mount
discussion.
Ommaney.
You just attacked me on behalf of Labor for abolishing it. George doesn't want it back.
You just blithely mocked me for saying that it's the
Do we
Labor
have any-
Party's fault the upper house was abolished.
In
The Labor Party
1922.
abolished the upper house. Doesn't matter when it happened. That's just an historical fact.
But are they good things or not? I mean,
I'm just
What
telling
came out
you
of the state
what was an
election is the
historical
Labor
fact.
Party.
Fascinating. We're going to look at Mount Ommaney.
yes, let's.
Mount
Ommaney.
Ommaney.
Let's have a look at Mount Ommaney. We're standing by, as we mentioned, as you can see on your screen, for Campbell Newman. We'll go there once that happens, but Mount Ommaney in the meantime, let's take a look at what
Labor's going to win that, I think.
the numbers are there.
Well, that's
Okay, so the margin was a 16% margin going into this tonight.
Big green vote. That's
Now,
Surely Labor's the favourite in that.
You give
well, they're
the
4.5%. They're almost 5% behind Peter on the primaries.
Yeah, but look at all those green votes.
Yeah, it's a strong
Yeah,
green.
but the green, half the greens
I know
exhaust,
it
so they
does.
get of
But
the
they
six.
get more than
Just say the
80%
6%
of those
green
that
votes
don't
that
exist.
I'll go
distribute.
5-1.
1.2 goes to us. 4.8 goes to Labor.
80% of
The Liberals
two,
are in front in Mount Ommaney. They've got to be in
I
front,
think
haven't they?
Yeah, but do you know that
no,
you're going to exhaust that many Greens votes?
Well, this is what we don't know. Is it a third exhaust or is
See,
it
I think
two-thirds?
Labor are ahead in that seat. I think it's too close to call, but I think they're ahead.
I don't. I think he's probably right. It'll depend entirely on PUP. And what, actually, you've made a good point, George. We don't know how many. It's all right. I'm always prepared to concede to greater minds. It seems that if PUP don't man all the booths, then you can't guarantee that their preferences will go through. And so we actually are completely ignorant, every one of us, on this. Now, if they go through, your man Michael is in big strife. If they don't go through,
Again,
he
postal
won't get
votes
up.
will favour the
You
other.
don't know.
That's right.
Well, I haven't got a clue, so I don't pretend.
And the
to
other
know what I
one,
don't know.
David, to look at is Ferny Grove, where Labor look as if they're in front. That'll have been included in the 40 seats that Labor have got. So it's the 9 plus 31. Labor will be including Ferny Grove, but the coalition or the Liberal National Party are not dead in that seat yet. They're hanging.
It's not in mine.
You haven't claimed that one?
I haven't claimed it. I've got 40-41, but I haven't got Ferny Grove yet.
Ferny Grove. Let's have a look at Ferny Grove while we wait for Campbell Newman there at the LNP function. So Ferny Grove, let's take a look at that. The margin tonight going into it was 9.5.
5. Yeah, you see again.
Vote again.
Big green vote.
Again, 3.6.
That will be close. But you'd have to say the Labor Party's got the advantage.
The Liberal National Party are 4.7 in front. They're very close. That is very close.
Yeah.
The Labor Party in Queensland believe they're a very good chance.
I actually think Labor's in front there on those numbers. If I had to put the old money out of the skyrocket, which doesn't come out very often these days, I think it would have to go on Labor.
And there's been another booth returned in Mansfield, which has the LNP now 0.1% ahead again.
In Mansfield?
Yes,
Yeah.
another booth.
I think that the Liberal Party or the Liberal National Party are going to come back in most of these close seats,
well, I think
not
that's
necessarily tonight, but certainly through the course of postal votes. The odds are that Labor, by the end of tonight, if you had to predict, look like they're just over the majority margin, but then that will erode in the days after, and possibly erode enough that the LNP scrape home literally with 45 seats.
In Mansfield, the pre-polls were that's one of those seats where the pre-polls were counted tonight.
We've won the Asian Cup. There you go. 2-1 in extra time. Things have just wrapped up there. You can almost hear the cheering from here, but that is some wonderful news after the disappointment last time around.
Brilliant.
Luke Doherty's there. Luke, tell us about it. They clung on to that goal, that extra goal they got in the extra time.
Yeah, they did indeed. What a remarkable achievement by this side. It was a journey that started some 15, 16 months ago when Ange Postecoglou was thrust into the role to take over from a coach in Holger Osik, who'd already qualified this team for last year's World Cup. Regeneration was on top of the to-do list for Ange Postecoglou. He got rid of some of the older players, phased them out and brought through a new crop. He took them to the World Cup where really, if they were lambs to the slaughter, it probably would have been a good result. What we saw there was some character, some drive, and a group that Postecoglou could work with and mould. Some great performances there. It was a tough lead into the Asian Cup where he took them to some tough places where perhaps a new coach wouldn't have been brave enough to take his side for fear that their confidence would have been dented. But he said, keep faith in the plan that I have, and it has paid off at this Asian Cup where right from the very first match, the Socceroos have been absolutely in stunning form. They had to show some true grit and character when the likes of Robbie Cruz, who 12 months ago did his anterior cruciate ligament in his knee, went off injured clutching his Achilles. He was stretchered off in tears. The right back, Ivan Franjic, also went off. Tim Cahill was substitute.
Luke, we're going to leave you there to go to Campbell Newman.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for waiting patiently for quite a long time. Well, very clearly this evening, or today, the people of Queensland have spoken. But I do say at this stage the results are still unclear. I'm coming out right now, though, because I think I do need to say a few words about what's going on. I particularly want to get out to Ashgrove, to my electorate, to a room full of supporters who've worked tirelessly, some of them for many months, some of them intensively for the last few weeks. They're great people from the local community, and I want to be with them this evening. But I can't leave here. I obviously can't leave here without saying a few words to Queensland as well. Firstly, of course, I just say this. Earlier, I spoke to Kate Jones and I congratulated her on her win tonight. So I say to you, Kate, publicly, congratulations to you and your team on your victory this evening. I respect the verdict of the people of Ashgrove, and I particularly thank them for the privilege, and it was two privileges that they gave me. The first one, the most important one for any MP, was to be the local member. And I have greatly enjoyed working for them. And I'm thrilled that we have achieved some great things in the local area. So thank you, Ashgrove. Thank you for all the various suburbs of that great electorate, and to the people, the great community groups. I've really enjoyed that. But I also thank the people of Ashgrove for giving me the privilege of serving the people of Queensland. And I thank the people of Queensland who in the 2012 election got behind the LNP team and allowed me to serve. And I really thank all of you. I thank every single man and woman, every voter, and it has been a great experience. My political career is over. It is over, and least... Tough, you're going to have to wear that one. I do want to reflect, though, on the last few years, and the times that we're living in are uncertain. Amy Remekas, did you get that? They are uncertain times. And over the last 3 years, we've had to make some very important decisions for this state. They were necessary. And I do truly believe that they have put Queensland in a far better place. We have put the state in a far better place than the way we found it. And I want to thank all the people who worked so very, very hard over those 3 years. There are, of course, my electorate staff, Tegan and Elise. I'll be seeing you shortly. Love you, girls. There are many volunteers who've worked in my electorate office to serve the people of Ashgrove as well. I particularly want to thank my staff in the Premier's office. You are a great group of men and women. You have done the state proud, and you've worked very hard for me, and you've been incredibly loyal. Some of you, like Kylie Lindsay, have very loud voices, and I live with that. But I thank you I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Maybe there'll be an LNP Premier and we can talk about relocation, job relocation. Maybe you won't be so lucky, you'll be with me. Okay. But thank you so much. I want to thank the men and women of the Queensland Police Service who have been my close protection detail over the last few years. You are sensational. They are sensational, and you know, they do a great job for Queenslanders, protecting us and making us safe, so thank you. I also want to reflect on the MPs that lost their seats tonight in the LNP team. I just say this, ladies and gentlemen, when the history of this government is written, people should look long and hard at a political team who did the hard yards and didn't leak and didn't bitch and moan. They got on with the job because they knew they were doing the right thing for Queensland. So to all those who lost their seats, I'm so sensationally proud of you. I just wish the community knew that you were all men and women of conviction, and I wish you the very best in your future careers. For the MPs that have managed to win their seats, you must keep on with the important work at hand. You've got to serve your communities, and you've got to, and again, we don't know whether we'll be in government or in opposition, but you've got to be part of a strong and stable LNP team, and I know that you will that. The LNP will offer either a strong and stable government or a very effective opposition in the years to come. And we might know tonight, we might not know for some days about that. But I say this to Queenslanders, the LNP team will meet at the first opportunity to elect a new leader. There are many fine men and women who could potentially put their hand up, but that is a matter for them. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for us to go to a new chapter in our lives. I want to... This is the rock, this is the lady, the love of my life, and I thank her for supporting me for 13 years in political office, we're going to go forward together and have a great life together. And I want to thank our two daughters who are not here this evening. They're far away, but thanks for their support as well. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, again, let's hope that we can get a result for Queenslanders soon. But again, to all of you, to so many people who've been terrific over the years, thank you for your support. Thank you, Queensland. It has been an honour. It has been a privilege. Thank you.
A good speech, a gracious speech, in fact, a difficult one to do for Campbell Newman, the outgoing Queensland Premier. My political career is over, he stated, so no question about that.
And now I really must go to Ashgrove. I'd love to mix and mingle. I love everyone here too, but there's the people who've been out right there today, and I want to. I'm coming. Okay? Can you? They're watching on the screens. We'll be there soon. Thank you, everybody.
He's conceded defeat in Ashgrove, where he heads now with his wife, but not conceding defeat for the LNP. That we're not going to know tonight. We may not know for some days in a number of seats that remain too close to call. Not reflecting there on why the LNP have suffered such a landslide, swing. We don't know if it's going to be a defeat of government. We won't know. But not going into blaming the federal government, for example, or any of the mistakes made during the campaign or during that term in government, but simply thanking those who have played a part during this past term in government, his personal staff, his protection detail, and also those many MPs who've come in for just one term and tonight leave Parliament as well. George Brandis, watching that speech, you can't help but, I suppose, feel some sympathy there for Campbell Newman. He faced a tough fight in winning that seat, and he goes out the way he came in.
Well, I think that speech was an absolute model of dignity and grace, and it must have been a very difficult speech to give, and I think it shows the measure of the man. I said before that here is somebody who could have been re-elected tonight if he'd decided to take an easier seat, but he stuck with the seat of Ashgrove, and that is a signal and almost unique example of enormous political courage. That's the measure of the man. He's had an extraordinary political career, and I suppose anybody in public life, when they leave public life in whatever circumstances they do, the question they have to ask themselves is, did I leave the nation or the state or the city a better place than when I found it? Now, Campbell Newman served for more than 2 terms as the Lord Mayor of Brisbane. He was an enormously successful Lord Mayor of Brisbane, Australia's biggest municipal government. He served a term as Premier of Queensland in which he made the right decisions. He left the state of Queensland enormously better and stronger and more prosperous than it was when he inherited it. He will be remembered not for tonight's defeat. He will be remembered for a very distinguished and successful period of service both to the city and to the state, and as also, of course, as the leader who 3 years ago presided over the greatest electoral victory in Australian history. Not a bad career.
And look, you know, tonight is obviously a difficult night for he and his family, but notwithstanding all those very nice things you've just said, clearly there have been some very big mistakes to go from that landslide victory to what's happened tonight.
Well, I think after we've heard a speech like that, I want to concentrate on the positives. Here's a man who made a very big impact, a very big difference. He made Brisbane a much better city than it was when he took over. He made Queensland a better state than it was when he took over. And finally, can I say to his wife, Lisa, who absolutely has been his rock. I mean, they're a wonderful couple. They are wonderful people. They have been great servants of the public in my state. And when the history of these years is written, his place will be an enormously honourable and respected place in the history of Queensland.
Richard, do you agree with that?
No. Look, I think, George, you're a very decent human being. And I think if I had to sit here and work out a way to defend this bloke, I couldn't have done it better. That was a superb job. But it doesn't actually cover what happened. Yes, he got a magnificent result 3 years ago. to squander that majority in one term is an effort no other Australian politician has ever managed. That's what he'll be remembered for.
Well, look, David, there's no question that you know, this is a profoundly disappointing, humiliating result, to be quite frank, even if we just scrape over the line. But I can do no more than just say that I thought George Brandis's remarks were absolutely superb. They're shared by everybody in the Liberal Party around the country. Queensland is a much better place for Campbell Newman, and George, I concur completely. Well said.
Craig?
Well, I've got Labor with 44 seats and 3 in play. Need 45 to form a majority.
You're giving them 44 at the moment.
Well, that, just by my calculations, I've got Labor on 44 with 3 in play, and the 3 are Maryborough, Whitsunday and Mansfield.
Well, we've got them on 43 on screen, but I just think that's ignoring what the Postals could do. I tend to think that that's where they are now, I agree, and there may even be a couple of seats better than that. But the Postals are something I want to wait to see, because I just think that there was a very significant additional move in the last 48 to 72 hours, well after people had sent Postals in.
I think that's true. By the way, my latest intelligence from Mansfield is that Mr Obeid, the Labor Party candidate, is 63 votes ahead after a notional distribution of preferences. But of course, as you say,
Won't hold that
the
with Postals.
Yeah. No. See, this is why you can. We're just guessing. You're just
all
guessing.
you're doing.
And I've got Mansfield
you're not
in the
gonna
other
know.
pile. I've said that it's in play, but you don't need to win Mansfield to win government. If Labor wins Maryborough and Whitsunday and holds the others, which it is holding reasonably well, then...
Sure, but we're not going to know who's won government, not just tonight, but for
10 days.
a number of days, if
until
not
the
over a week.
Postals come in.
Let me just stick with reflections on Campbell Newman for a moment. We will hear from Anastasia Palaszczuk as well shortly, no doubt. But this is such a fascinating political study, and Richo, you say it well, to go from that record landslide and then within 3 years to lose your own seat and potentially government as well is an effort that we don't see or haven't seen in Australian politics ever.
Never, but I think, David, what we've all got to realise, doesn't matter which party we're in or where we come from, the electorate is becoming more and more volatile, less and less likely to stick with the way their parents voted or even with the way they themselves voted at the last election. They're more and more able to say, I don't like this one, I'm going to go that way. And I mean, when I started in politics, which I hate to say it, it's so many years ago now, December 71 I became an organiser of the Labor Party. And at that stage...
December 71? Time to move on.
Well, I have.
Labor won in 72.
At that stage, you've got to say a maximum of 10% would ever switch. Now I think that number's up to 30%, and I think there's every chance that in the next decade it'll grow, not diminish.
Is this part of a consumer disposable culture where you don't get your toaster fix, you throw it out and buy a new one? Is this what we're seeing in politics as well? That the willingness to give 2 terms to a government if you're not happy with them, forget it. You don't do it.
If they
right
don't like you, they're just going to kick you out. I think the idea that, and we all would have said a few years ago, you always get 2 terms. Well, you don't anymore.
Victoria
and I think we've got to... Exactly, Victoria didn't. I think we've all got to face the fact that there's been a big change here, David, and I don't believe that's going to change anytime soon. That change is going to be ongoing.
And this gets back to
And that means that Labor Party, Liberal Party, doesn't matter who they are, they've got to work harder and harder to maintain the faith of the troops.
And this
I
gets,
think, can I just add to that observation, which I generally agree with? Don't forget also, as we were debating a moment ago, Queensland doesn't have an upper house. So whatever the reasons here, institutional impediments were not one of them.
correct. Whereas your government, for example, can rightly point some of its political blame to difficulties in the Senate. It can't be done in Queensland. Gets back to this argument, I suppose, we were having earlier about the ability to do reform, the ability to sell reform and take the voters with you if they're not going to give you much rope.
The main thing here is what was said before the election.
That's right.
He broke promises. Julia Gillard got hammered for it. Tony Abbott will get hammered for it. And Campbell Newman was just hammered for it.
It's a point I made earlier, and it's just amazing how many people dismiss it as being irrelevant. It is the most relevant issue in Australian politics today. People will not accept broken promises. Maybe the trivial ones, maybe where the words were very vague and then the opposition parties say that's a broken promise and it's debatable. but they do not accept anymore leaders making a set of commitments before an election and then saying afterwards, well, circumstances have changed.
But David, your fundamental theory is absolutely correct, that you know, look, people wanted to, Malcolm Turnbull was spending, what, 30 billion on the RNBN policy, Labor's was going to be 90 billion. So that we could get broadband speed a second or so faster under Labor, we're spending extra 60 billion. So people won't wait 1-2 extra seconds for their broadband to be connected. So they're not going to wait 4 years for a government they're not happy with. Yeah, the whole society's changed. It was an article of faith, if you said, for my entire life that everyone got 2 terms. For God's sake, even Gough got 2 terms. That's how generous.
Deserves them too.
That's how he didn't deserve 1. But that's how generous the Australian public were. Whitlam got 2. And so, yeah, hey,
finish his second.
you see this, you know, we had a 13.9% swing against Labor when we sat here in 2012, 13.9%, and tonight we're seeing, we don't know yet the final one, 11 or 12% back the other way. It's a dramatic swing. You could have thought Labor would win 20 seats without any problem because the vote was so extremely good for the Liberal National Party in 2012. But to get over 30 seats is certainly beyond expectations.
Let me go to Kieran Gilbert, Elizabeth Tilley. They were sitting there watching all of this at the LNP function there. Tell us about the mood in the room, and have people hung around? Are they clearing out pretty quickly now?
They are starting to clear out now, David, but really for the first time tonight we did see some emotion in the room when Campbell Newman came out to give that concession speech. There were cheers, there were tears from some of the party faithful here, and we really did see him concede really quite graciously, thanking Kate Jones and all his supporters, but also saying that now his political career is over after 13 years. And you could see there was a bit of emotion there himself, even when he made that speech, wasn't
And
there?
certainly, absolutely, when he paid tribute to Lisa, his wife, as well. And while there was a lot of support here, and we've heard the fine words of Senator Brandis, although contested words from Richo, I've picked up a fair bit of frustration with Campbell Newman as well among senior LNP figures. Frustration at his, the fact that they had begged him to run for the seat of Moggill, the safe seat, that he would have won it. He was not for turning. According to some of them, he was never going to hold on to Ashgrove. It's traditionally a marginal Labor seat. But as I say, they begged him. He was not for turning, and he's fallen tonight in quite remarkable circumstances.
Well, yes, he has. And the question now, I suppose, Kieran, for many in that room and many in the LNP is government or opposition, who is going to be the leader?
Well, there's two real favourites at the moment: Tim Nicholls, the Treasurer, and Lawrence Springborg, the long-serving opposition leader. You'd think if they go into opposition that Springborg, he wouldn't want it. He served for years as opposition leader. If they do sneak across the line, Springborg's a real possibility, I think, here, because this is a repudiation of the Newman government agenda, owned in a big way by Tim Nicholls as well, Elizabeth, as the Treasurer, particularly of those asset sales, the privatisation.
Definitely. I mean, he's been behind all that from the beginning. He's been pushing that for a long time, and you know, when they rolled out that economic plan and their costings, he was really at the forefront of that. So he's definitely the front runner to take on the position of Premier.
He is, but a legacy that remains, a headache that remains for whoever takes over, is that policy which clearly today in our exit poll showed it not a popular one, the privatisation of the ports and power industry.
Kieran, Liz, thank you. I want to just go to Laura Jays, who's in Ashgrove, Campbell Newman heading there, as we heard him say as he left the stage. Now, Laura, he's congratulated Kate Jones. We were looking at the Sunday Mail front page, giant killer, she's being called. So I'm sure it's a very different mood across town or across the electorate where her camp is. But where you are now, it must be a very, very disappointing night for them.
It really is, David, and as you imagine, there's a lot of tears here, and I can actually report that a lot of people have gone home. They've cleared out of the room. There's still about 50 volunteers here. Campbell Newman's expected to arrive in about 10 minutes' time.
So
He's
they've gone
not
before he
making a
gets there.
speech at the podium that was set up earlier in the day. Instead, that's exactly right. He'll come in, he'll mingle with a few of the volunteers left here, and then he's not going to make this speech at a podium with any LNP signage behind him. He's just going to make a few off-the-cuff remarks in a more casual setting. One thing that perhaps you can get the panel to reflect on it as well. It was put to me earlier in the night, a question about Campbell Newman's arrogance and how much that did play in. But someone reminded me that in the 2012 campaign, there was such a personal attack directed towards Campbell Newman and his family. And ever since then, it appears that he has kind of had this hard exterior. And that, it said, it did affect him quite a lot. We saw those heartfelt words from him towards his wife Lisa tonight, and I imagine that there's probably a bit of a sense of relief from both of them. There was a question as well about whether, well, some within the party were kind of questioning whether they could try and get Campbell Newman back into politics somehow, and one that's quite close to both Campbell and Lisa said they don't think that Lisa would let him go through it again. Certainly it's quite traumatic for Campbell Newman tonight, and just judging from the crowd here, traumatic for a lot of the volunteers and the staffers as well, and I believe that he is just a couple of minutes away now, David.
All right, Laura, thank you very much for that. Some interesting points there. And now this question about who's going to be leader. And much does depend, doesn't it, on whether they're in government or opposition, the person they go for. Tim Nicholls, Lawrence Springborg, as we've been discussing, the two options. Lawrence Springborg comes from the National Party background of the party, and Tim Nicholls, the Liberal side of the party. If you, Peter, trying to...
Well, I would have thought if you're trying to get the Katter party on board, you've got to go with Lawrence Springborg. If you lose the election, though, as Kieran rightly says, there's no way he'll want to do that, in which case it's definitely Tim Nicholls. It's not necessarily a done deal that it's Lawrence Springborg if they are in a position to form government, but you would think, you could just imagine it. The days, weeks, how long will it take for the Katter party to come to a conclusion? Well, during that time, all the indications will be given, I would have thought, that they would prefer Springborg to Nicholls.
Well, the National Party people clearly are going to have the numbers. The Liberals have been wiped out pretty badly, so the old National Party types will have the numbers. So if they elect Nicholls, it's a big concession to the Liberals, a concession I doubt the Nats want to make.
It's a complicated and a fairly complex period ahead from where we are right now, isn't it, in terms of working out who should be leader, because you really do have to see how the dust settles in these seats.
The complexity will settle things down, though, at the federal level with all these leadership rumblings.
Where do you stand, George? Who should lead?
It would be unpardonably presumptuous of me to try to suggest who should be chosen as leader. That's entirely a matter for my state colleagues, and I respect their right to make that decision uninfluenced by external pressures.
Without choosing one of the two candidates, or indeed a third or fourth, is it an easy decision, do you think, for the party, or will it actually be a contested, difficult one?
I'm sure after the shock of what has happened tonight, none of the decisions that will need to be made will be easy decisions. I think none of the candid self-appraisal that will need to be undergone will be easy. But of course it will be necessary.
We're looking now at the live pictures coming in from the Labor headquarters. David Lipson and Brooke Wiley are there. Anastasia Palaszczuk, do we know how far off she might be?
We're told she's about 15 minutes away at this point, and everyone in this room, they were buoyant before, they're ecstatic now. They just cannot wait for this hero in their minds to step into the room. You can bet there will be an almighty cheer here. When Campbell Newman was conceding defeat, quite a few of them were chanting, "Get off, get off, get off." So no love for the man that was absolutely pummeled in his own seat. But Brooke, we can certainly expect a whole lot of cheering, a whole lot of screaming, in fact, when Anastasia Palaszczuk walks into this room.
Yeah, we certainly can, David. And just a short time ago, we had a little bit of a crowd rev up from Milton Dick and from Joanne Miller, who is the Shadow Health Minister here in Queensland. They were cheering up the crowd, and it was very clear when Milton Dick said that Queenslanders have asked for change, that no matter what the outcome is tonight, certainly Queenslanders have sent a very strong message to the Newman government, and this crowd here roared at that. You can only imagine the response that we'll see when Anastasia Palaszczuk takes to the stage in about 15 minutes' time.
And she didn't have to do much, did she? A very modest campaign and really a pretty modest 3 years. She didn't make a whole lot, or didn't draw a whole lot of attention to herself. And as I say, not a lot of big spending promises at all.
No, that's right. We didn't see big spending pledges at all from Anastasia Palaszczuk or the Labor opposition during this campaign. They really did run a modest campaign. They were criticised for that by the LNP. Campbell Newman during the debate called it negligent, that there was not a big plan, a big vision for Queensland by the party. But even in those early stages of the campaign, I don't think that anyone could have predicted that they would be facing this kind of result, that they could genuinely be in government just 3 years after that, near electoral annihilation in 2012. But certainly, I think what we will see from Labor here, certainly in this room, is just going to be euphoric scenes as Anastasia Palaszczuk takes to the stage.
And we've seen several of her family members arrive here in the past hour or so, including her father, Henry Palaszczuk, who was a long-time serving MP for the ALP, and also her grandmother, who arrived a little while ago, quite frail but very excited this evening. It should be a big night for us here.
Thank you, and we'll go there, of course, as soon as we do see Anastasia Palaszczuk. Kevin Rudd, by the way, has tweeted stunning achievement for Anastasia and Anastasia's stunning achievement for Queensland women. Stunning achievement for the daughter of a Polish migrant from war-torn Germany. And look, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about Anastasia Palaszczuk, and as Lippo mentioned there, it's a good point. She did run that modest campaign, small target. We touched on this earlier, but it is a bit of a blank page, really, should she actually become Premier.
Well, she served as a minister in a couple of portfolios in the last government, and I've known her for quite a while. I actually always, when people said, oh, she's just getting the job because she's the only one there, well, she was. But I also said to them, but don't underestimate her, this girl's not stupid. Now, if you look at the campaign, I've got to say it was a very, very good campaign. They were outspent massively. Now, I don't think, George, you or Michael can actually deny it, outspent massively, but what they did do, and what Anastasia did and what Anthony Chisholm did in the ALP office, is manage to get this poles and wires 99-year lease.
Front and centre.
Not just front and centre, but being raised as an issue every time the tracking went through the last 2 weeks. It kept going up. Now, that's really an achievement, because all the ads from the Liberal side were about the strong plan and all the infrastructure was going to be built with all this money you were going to get from the sale. Now, there was a massive campaign on this, and they managed, without the money, without any of the big guns, to overcome it. So I sent Anastasia a text a little while back, and I said, you've just become our national treasure. This is a phenomenal performance from her and from Anthony Chisholm and the campaign team. The outgunned, outmanned, and they got there. It looks to me like they're in a chance of getting there anyway.
Let's just drop in on this. Campbell Newman's, as you can see there, arrived in Ashgrove. These are his local supporters. I think he's going to say a few words to them. They're having good cheer there despite a tough night for them all. They've worked their guts out, no doubt about it, to lose the seat and possibly lose government.
Thank you so much for staying here this evening. It is great to be out here finally. We stayed and hoped we would get a result that we could talk about. But I hope you saw on the big screen that I really wanted to get out here and be with all of you this evening. Because you have all been a great team of people that worked so very, very hard in this election. And some of you have been working not just in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but you've been working for some many, many months. And also there are many, many months. And also there are people in this room who have been helping myself and Lisa since we first embarked on a journey in public service almost 13 years ago. It was on the 15th of February 2002, out to dinner. It was the day after Valentine's Day dinner where I embarked on this sort of journey. A journey in Brisbane City Hall, which was a bit of a quixotic sort of go. and we got there at 7 years in City Hall, a year as the leader of the opposition, and then almost 3 years in this job.
Giddy up!
Stephen Connery, that's enough from you. But there are people here who we've known in more recent times. There are people here who have helped us from the very beginning. And really this evening, it is simply about thanking people. And I thank you all of you, for the tremendous support that you've provided over the last few years. Before I start to talk about people, though, again, I just want to thank the people of Ashgrove for electing me 3 years ago. I have really enjoyed doing this job. I really enjoyed being the local member. I've worked with so many fantastic community groups like SOAN, like Jeeps Rugby and Valleys Cricket, like the Gap Football Club and Sports Club, the Netball Club, the Gap Netball Club, the power of Queensland Netball, by the way. Amazing people. Mitchelton Youth Club, and all the great principals of all the schools, independent, Catholic and state schools. It just is a wonderful community, and I thank again the people of Ashgrove. It's been a great privilege. And again, I congratulate Kate Jones. We both know the area well. We're both locals, and I know she'll serve the community well going forward in the next few years. But now can I just turn to acknowledge a few people. I understand Teresa Gambaro is here somewhere, as the federal member. Can I acknowledge everyone's favourite granny, Councillor Geraldine Knapp. Councillor Andrew Wines. Just going back to Knapp for a second, you know, I remember, again, it was probably about March, April 2002, and both Knapp and Prentice, who's not here at the moment, I don't know where she is, but she's commentating. Well, Knapp and Prentice kept me waiting for a considerable period of time as the new Lord Mayor of Canada. I've never forgotten, but I have forgiven. Can I start off by acknowledging the members of the SEC? Can I acknowledge Dave Hutchinson? Andy Russell, Dom Condon and Stephen Toomey. Thank you so much. Can I acknowledge the volunteer team leaders? Steve Toomey gets another honourable mention. Julie Tankred, Sam Anderson, Alex, Penny Talbot, Michael Stone and Sam Connery. So thank you so much. I acknowledge my electorate staff, Tegan and Elise.
All right, we'll leave Campbell Newman there as he continues to thank some of his local troops on the ground there. We're about 10 minutes away, we're told, from Anastasia Palaszczuk speaking at the Labor function in Brisbane. And there is a prospect, Craig Emerson, and I'm sure she won't be declaring victory tonight, but there is a prospect she could be Premier, and not just in a minority government, but possibly a majority.
Correct. I've counted 44 seats that Labor has won, and there are 3 in play. Now, Labor doesn't need to win those 3. If it won 1, it forms a government in its own right.
So you reckon they are on 44 outright?
Well, they're not that close. You know, they're half a percentage point or more, or many percentage points ahead on the 44. And then there's 3, Maryborough, Whitsunday and Mansfield. And I think George and I think that Maryborough will fall to Labor.
Let's have a look at
45.
Because you're now saying Palmerston has gone to Labor. Maybe we can bring that up. Let's have a look at Palmerston and see what the count is there, and then go to those others you mentioned. Because, gee, a majority win for Labor tonight was unthinkable. Now, this is Palmerston, 67% counted, and you can see just how close that primary vote is. What we don't know is, with optional preferential voting, where those pup votes, green votes, and other independent votes go.
You've got to say there's no way Labor can lose that now. No way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. Labor in front there, no question.
So then Maryborough is the one that you're saying is...
Would give the 45th.
Would give them the 45th. Let's have a look at Maryborough. All right, so we've got 56% counted.
Can't tell.
29.6.
I mean, that is just an absolute dog's breakfast. There's no way you can tell what's going to happen there.
Because you're basing that, Craig, on figures that don't sufficiently factor in Foley. You never know what's going to happen with Foley because of the pup preferences.
But let's bear this in mind. We will not have to speculate about preferences by the end of the night. They will have counted them. They don't just count the primary votes and go out and have a beer and go home. It doesn't take long to count the preferences. In every election in which I've
Well, what's the preference count in Maryborough?
Well, I'm saying Labor is ahead. Now, doesn't mean it will win, but if it wins Maryborough, by my calculations, it's on 45. That's a majority.
Richard?
Well, I think there's still 2 or 3 others that are in play, so I'm reluctant to make the call. But what Craig is saying is certainly within the realms of possibility. I just don't think you can be as confident to say we've won 44. But I tell you what, when I look at it, we've won 42 or 43, I think. So I actually have 42. I think there are 5 in play. And so I don't think it's impossible to sit here and say Labor can get 45. And an hour ago I thought it was. It's got a bit better for Labor in a number of places. There's no doubt about that. Usually at this time of night it goes the other way. It hasn't tonight. I think when you're on a roll, you're on a roll.
There's one thing we can definitely predict, and it's that the LNP, I should say, the LNP can't form government in their own right. No question about that.
I agree with
Not if the Labor Party gets more than 41 seats, which they're now going to
do.
do.
They will.
Correct. That's correct.
So who's in a better position to form government at the moment?
Well, you would have to think, because of momentum as much as anything else, and because of the asset sales promises, you would have to think it's Labor. That said,
Postals tend to favour the Conservatives.
Well, yeah, but I'm not even talking about that anymore. So even assuming that the Liberals do, the LNP I should say, do as well as they can in postals, they're still short of a majority, and they're probably sitting on similar numbers of votes to what the Labor Party are. So you're looking at the crossbench one way or the other. Labor, their benefit with the crossbench is both momentum and of course the reality of not just the momentum but the reality as well of the asset sales. By the same token, you would think that the Katter Party would want to support the right of centre party, particularly if it had Springborg in charge. It's going to be a negotiation.
Let me just...
Except the Katter Party may not be in the negotiation if the Labor Party gets 44 seats because of Wellington.
And that's where postals do come into it, as you say, David.
Now, let me just... Bruce Hawker's just reminded me, he says he's jet lagged, but he's staying up because he wants to see you, Richo, give PVO that kiss, which you were going to do.
It's coming before we come off air. It's on the way.
Those who weren't watching earlier, Richo did say if Labor got to, 40 seats?
Yep.
Well, that's over. I mean...
That's over and done.
Pucker up, boys.
Before we leave,
Pucker up.
I'm on the way.
Can I just say, this sort of deal requires mutual consent.
Or a consensus.
Giving no means no.
I think I saw your eyes light up when he said it, PVO.
There was no objection at the time.
Well, hang on. Silence is consent.
In fact, I detected just a little bit of desire there. I thought he was giving me a bit of a come on there.
David, this show's deteriorating. I wish
you know what will inject some sobriety into the show? Warren Truss, the Deputy Prime Minister,
yes, that'll definitely do it.
He has sat down with Kieran Gilbert at the LNP function as we stand by for Anastasia Palaszczuk's speech. Let's have a listen to Warren Truss's take on this and what some of the federal implications might be.
The Deputy Prime Minister Warren Truss joins me now. Mr Truss, thanks so much for your time. A difficult night for the LNP in Queensland.
Well, the voters have certainly shown their volatility. It's extraordinary that after such a huge win just 3 years ago, that now the government may well fall, or we could have a hung parliament, or maybe just narrowly elected. I think that that certainly has sent a very clear message to the governments right across the country that no government is ever secure, that they always have to work and make sure that they win the confidence of the people, and particularly when you're putting an ambitious agenda before the people, that they understand it and are prepared to be a part of it.
And specifically, what are the messages, the lessons to be learned federally for the Abbott government? Do you concede that the unpopularity of the Prime Minister played some part in the enormous swing against the LNP?
Well, we have an ambitious agenda too, and I think the clear message to us is that we must explain that to the Australian people and explain to them why it's necessary. I think everyone wants better services. They want more infrastructure. It has to be paid for. We can't keep borrowing other people's money to do that sort of thing. So there does need to be a mature and sensible community debate as to how we can ensure that the services that Australians want for the future, the infrastructure we want for the future, can be provided in an affordable and sustainable way. This election campaign was between one team that had no agenda offered to the people into the future, just simply opposition to the leasing of assets, while the other side had an extraordinary program, billions of dollars of new roads and railway lines and hospitals.
But that team that you say has been entirely negative is now very possibly the next government of this state.
And that follows on from what happened in Victoria, where successful campaigns were based on negativity and being against things rather than for them. Now, I think as a nation we need to be for progress and development. We need to be for providing better services for the people and ensuring sustainability into the future. So what political parties need to do is to ensure that we're able to encourage the Australian people or the people in a particular state to embrace reform and to embrace that progress and infrastructure development that's so necessary for the future.
Why is the Prime Minister's leadership in so much trouble? This is going to do nothing to help him shore up his hold on the Liberal Party and on the government.
Well, those are obviously issues for the Liberal Party, and I'm leader of the National, so I don't want to comment on that other than to say that I've enjoyed the privilege of working with Tony Abbott. I think he's a fine leader, and I look forward to that partnership continuing through the year ahead.
And so you're confident it will, despite the very strong sense within parts of the party that the Prime Minister's finished?
Well, that is not in my hands, but let me say that I have confidence in the ambition that the Prime Minister has for this country, his dedication and commitment. I believe he has a genuine determination to make sure that we make the changes that are necessary to provide quality services for Australian people and for them to be sustainable in the future.
He's obviously got some problems up here, doesn't he? Some real problems in terms of his profile, his popularity or lack of in this state.
Well, we all need to address those issues and make sure that the government better explains its agenda so that we can implement the changes that we've proposed. Admittedly, many of the things that we've wanted to do have been frustrated in the Senate. We've been unable to deliver things that would have made a real difference to Australian people because we haven't had the numbers in the Senate to pass the necessary legislation. So that has handicapped our agenda. But we've got to find ways to work through that so that there can be an assurance that the government is in touch with the will and the aspirations of Australian people. And I'm confident that Tony Abbott and the team are able to do that, and we'll have to work harder and harder this year to ensure that that's delivered.
Deputy Prime Minister Warren Truss, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Welcome. You're very welcome.
I hope Warren misspoke there when he said he has enjoyed working with Tony Abbott.
Yes, I've enjoyed the privilege.
Clarified afterwards.
I've enjoyed the privilege of working with Tony Abbott, and I look
all
forward to
do that
working
sort of
more with him in the future.
We all heard that, yeah. I enjoyed the privilege. It's been an honour, and I look forward to working with him into the future for the next week.
Anyway, look, he's saying all the right things, but the questions from Kieran are spot on, aren't they? Tony Abbott was told, don't come anywhere near Queensland, you're toxic on the ground. He doesn't go there because he's apparently too unpopular. And now it looks like they may well lose government anyway. Richo, how much trouble is Tony Abbott in Queensland?
Oh, I think he's in a world of trouble wherever he goes. And I think Monday's speech at the press club is an incredibly important occasion for him.
It's the most important speech he's given, isn't it?
He's ever given. If he is to have an opportunity to rebuild, I mean, it won't rebuild him. You can't think that he'll make a speech on Monday and it'll all be okay. It doesn't happen like that. But if he's going to rebuild, he needs to stand up on Monday and say some serious things. I mean, he's just got to get up and say there'll be no more knights and dames. He's made a laughingstock of himself, and if he clings on to that, he's dead. He's got to say the paid parental leave schemes are goner, and he's got to say, look, on Medicare rebates, he won't say these words, I did ambush you, I understand that, I'll take it to the next election and explain all the reasons why, as he should have been doing much more often with his treasurer.
Let me just take those apart. Knights and dames. Now, this is the standout, right? That's obviously upset everyone over the last week, and you've acknowledged, Senator, a distraction in the Queensland campaign for a few days there as well. Do you agree with Richo that he should stand up on Monday? So that's it. I'm not having any more of these.
I'm not going to anticipate what the Prime Minister will say on Monday. I'm sure it will be it's obviously an important speech. I'm sure he will deliver it well, but I don't think it would be appropriate for me to anticipate what he might say.
But can I ask you this? Do you think he should persist with knights and dames?
I'm not going to anticipate anything he might say.
Can I make this point?
That's your opinion. No matter what he's going to say, what do you think of knights and dames?
Enough ink has been spilled on that issue for the last 7 days. I am not going to spill any more.
Are you still on the board of the Council of the Order of Australia?
Yes.
Should that council, at least if you're going to have knights and dames, decide who they are?
Oh, heavens above, David. It's not something I've really ever thought about.
Really?
No,
how can you not have thought about it? That was the best solution, I thought, to cauterise the wound after he appointed Prince Philip. I mean, the best thing to do, I think, if you wanted to keep knights and dames, was to say he was at least going to defer the decision-making to the Order of Australia.
I didn't disagree with you. I said it's not something I've ever thought about. I mean, you're obviously much more excited about this issue than I am.
Let me say this, though, about the speech. The set speech at the National Press Club, whatever he says, however good it is, won't be what will get covered, in the most part. What will get covered will be the answers to the incredibly tough questions he will get in that forum.
Well, what I can't understand is this. Campbell Newman calls the election. Tony Abbott and his staff, whoever, set the speech, this really pivotal speech, for the Monday after the Queensland election, and no one believed the LNP would do well there. So whatever he has to say, no matter how good it might be, it will be completely overshadowed.
But you know what, though, Craig Emerson? He thought that the LNP would lose skin but win.
Well, it's a
and I think his plan was that his speech would be...
We all thought that.
I'm not condemning that thought, but that thought is the reason that he thought, off the back of that, he would do a set speech saying, you know what, we're like the Newman government. We're prepared to lose some skin to get serious reforms done. Well, not now.
I think you are.
That was the logic.
I think you are speculating far too much on what may or may not have been his thinking. You just don't know.
Well, that's true. I didn't think he would appoint.
Well, I don't think it was a
Prince Philip at night.
But what do you think his thinking was when he announced Prince Philip? Now, what do you think his thinking was? Because I'd really like to know.
No one could presume to know.
That issue is done and dusted, and I honestly am not going to kick this along into an 8th news cycle by saying anything about it.
David, it's worth saying about this extraordinary week we've had about Prince Philip, right? It's captivated the news for a whole week.
Andrew Bolt hasn't stopped.
No, he hasn't. And whilst this is a very, very imperfect analogy, you know, no cattle businesses were closed down under Tony Abbott's appointment of Prince Philip. Hundreds of billions of dollars of debt weren't run up under Tony Abbott's policy of appointing Prince Philip. No one drowned at sea under Tony Abbott's policy of appointing Prince Philip. No Australian was electrocuted under Tony Abbott's policy of appointing Prince Philip. Get this bloody thing in some kind of order of priority for this country. This is a minuscule issue for this country. These experts here, your mob left us hundreds of billions in debt.
Here we go.
You almost destroyed the cattle industry. You destroyed the cattle industry. You had a policy in relation to border protection. All you need to do was stick with Howard, and 1,200 people drowned at sea. You were responsible, you and your mates were responsible for the pink bat scandal, the school hall scandal, and what have you done all week? Rabbited on about Prince Philip, for God's sake.
Michael, Australia has. The point you're missing is that Australians, all of them, everywhere, doesn't matter what walk of life, doesn't matter what village or town or city or suburb, every Australian has wins about it. So what you're getting up is saying, I've got no confidence in you. Stop thinking that. They're not going to stop.
Doesn't that show you the problem we have in this country? When the biggest issue can be a knighthood for Prince Philip,
but can I just
when
say,
the country's $400 billion in debt, man.
I didn't actually hear whether Craig Emerson did or didn't say anything about Prince Philip.
Well, do I get a say?
In a moment. But I did hear Miranda Devine. I did hear Janet Albrechtsen. I did hear Andrew Bolt. I did hear Alan Jones. I did hear Greg Sheridan. I heard a lot of other people. Chris Kenny, not just the day after, but as recently as today, writing and talking about it. So it's been Tony Abbott's base. Oh, I have as well.
Janet Albrechtsen.
But isn't this the problem in the country?
Well,
this is the biggest issue. This is the biggest issue. I mean, there's poor old Hockey. He comes into office with $400 billion or more of debt you fellas have left behind. You left it behind. You were there.
Now,
the public gave you a pension.
When you run out of
performance, the public gave you a pension of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
You know what, Michael? We don't want to spend all night talking about Prince Philip.
And you're talking about Prince Philip, man. For God's sake, get a grip on yourself.
We want to move on.
Michael made exactly that same speech 3 years ago.
It was true then, it's true now.
When the ALP went down to 7 seats in Queensland, he said, it's all your fault, it's shocking, it's terrible. I had nothing to say about Prince Philip this week. If I did, I wouldn't have been able to get on television or radio because all the Conservative commentators crowded it out and condemned it. But look, please, you're going to be the president of the Liberal Party in Victoria. Go to the next election saying what you're saying. It's all Labor's fault. We can't govern because it's all Labor's fault. Again, that would be a magnificent statement.
No one's saying that.
And as the coalition loses, they'll be going out, if they did, they'd be going out the door saying, look, we couldn't govern, it was all Labor's fault. People will not accept that. You're elected to govern, get on with the job and govern.
And that's what we're trying to do. But I tell you what is all Labor's fault, Craig. The debt, because when you went out of office, when we went out of office in 2007, as you know, the debt was zero. And the debt was zero. So all the debt that was accumulated during the government of which you're a member was accumulated by you.
And I know that you personally, George, have assumed away the global financial crisis.
Let's go back to what's happening tonight in Queensland. I'm just looking at those numbers at the top of the screen there. The target 45, Labor's just dropped back from 44 to 43. Now, that's just one number, but it does tell us, doesn't it, that over the coming days, possibly weeks, these numbers might bounce around a little. They will.
And we may not know the result of this election for more than a week.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's 89 seats, David. So the missing number there is the 5 in doubt.
Yeah.
So, and look, you know, as you know, my position is I think there's too many exhaustive preferences we don't know about. I don't think 43 is solid, and I don't think 38 is solid. I think the 3 is solid.
Let's have a look at the state of the House, what the Chamber's going to look like in Queensland, based on the count that you can see there at least. This is what our computer projection is. 43 for Labor would look like that, 38 LNP, 2 Katter Party MPs, and Peter Wellington, the independent, in purple there. 5 in doubt, as Michael Kroger says. That, but, you know, you're right, 43 isn't solid. I'd say 40, 41 are solid.
41 definitely solid.
41.
Yeah. 41's definitely solid.
It's more.
And I'd say 42 almost, but not 43. I don't see 43.
I just wouldn't persist with the argument.
At the end of the whole process.
I wouldn't persist with the argument that we don't know where the preferences are going. They will not leave tonight until they count the
I'm saying right at this minute.
Yeah.
But you're quite right.
Just saying,
if they're doing them now,
yeah, it's
well, let's get an update then on some of those seats.
They'll have counted just about everything.
Let's have a look at some of those ones that are in doubt. In fact, let's bring up firstly the ones that are in doubt. Cliffhangers: Mansfield, Maryborough, Mount Ommaney, Redlands, and Whitsunday. So let's go through them. Mansfield. Let's bring up Mansfield. And okay, there we are. 69% now counted. And where are we? 46.
You have to say the LNP are narrowly ahead.
I think the LNP will win it.
They're ahead by 41 votes. According to the scrutineers.
That is narrow.
They're ahead by 41 votes.
If you go back to the...
All right. And then Mount Ommaney. Let's go to Mount Ommaney. So Mansfield.
So I think on this one, the Liberal Party are looking pretty good.
Yes, okay, so 77% count, 46.9 is
is Mount Ommaney in your 40?
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. I don't think it should be.
Michael Kroger, do you think you'd put that in the LNP column?
Well, look, you know, I look this way. When you've got, they're 8.1% ahead of the primary. The Liberals are home. Tanya Smith's home in that seat.
I agree.
A mile in front.
That is not in doubt.
She's a mile in front.
Craig had it in the Labor column, didn't he?
No, I've got it. Coalition.
All right,
and Labor had that in their column recently, so...
Let's have a look at Redlands. There we are. So similarly, 63% counted, 44.3.
Liberal Party okay in that one too, I think.
That'd be fine.
And thank God it's 21.1%, so it should never have been in doubt.
And
But none of this affects Labor getting to 43 or 44?
No.
So far?
No, we're just going through the ones that are listed as cliffhangers are in doubt in the computer at the moment. Whitsunday, I think, was the other. And I think that's looking all right too. 76% counted.
So I think
that's really
I think Labor are going to win that.
So I'd have Labor in front at the moment on those numbers.
Yep, just.
Yeah,
Could lose it. Could lose it.
Labor, that's one of the seats that gets Labor to 44, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mansfield and
If they
Whitsunday are both really too close to call.
Yeah. All right, and maybe we'll look at
Maryborough, what did we decide there? That's a dog.
close.
Well, it all depends, as I keep saying, what happens with Foley and whether he picks up enough preferences to jump ahead of the Labor Party. Foley's the former independent member.
This one is just, you just can't predict.
But if you go back to the first graphic you put up, you might see
For
the
this
leads.
seat?
Yeah, for all of them, at the very beginning, where it said
There's chamber.
the 5 seats in doubt. If you go back to that, I think
Okay,
you'll
let's go
see
back to that
margin.
then. The
You'll see the
cliffhangers.
number of
Let's
votes.
put the cliffhanger page back up. I don't think it's got numbers on it, just a list. Okay, it does.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so if they're 5 in doubt and they go the way they're going at the moment, that would put Labor at 44. It would put the LNP at 42.
It may end up on 40. If it loses Mansfield, if Labor loses Mansfield, it goes to 42.
It goes to 42.
I think the Whitsunday's one is
goes
wrong
to
on
43.
Goes to it stays on 43.
I think Whitsunday's is wrong there too.
And then there's three in doubt. That's why I don't
That's
think
right.
you don't
Stays
know,
on
Dave.
43.
Stays on 43,
We're
but
just
that would
guessing.
require
You're
getting both
guessing.
categories.
All we do know, David, is we'd like the Labor leader to come and give a speech.
We sure would. Let's have a look at what's happening over at the Labor headquarters because we were told you'd be there a while ago. They're obviously looking at those numbers. They're obviously wanting to have something clearer to say as to whether they're going to win government or not. But I don't think we're going to know that in the next hour, are we?
I think if she wants to try and wait till that comes out, she won't make a speech for another week. I think
She just needs to come out and say, we hope to form government in the coming days.
That's what she's got to say.
This is a sensational result for
Yeah,
Labor.
I mean, she can't lose in this
No
speech.
one expected we'd do this well, and we have.
Since we've got an hour to fill until she arrives, why don't we run Kevin Rudd's resignation speech from the 2013 election? That went on for a while.
All right. Well,
I was in the room for that.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
God.
let's have a
Things
look
you
at
put up with, Peter. The things you've had to endure.
I am just one
line
more
that
thing
I've
if
never
I
seen
can
a
ask
bunch of
for
losers
the
look more happy with
statewide
themselves.
vote at the moment. We can have a look at what the statewide vote is and the swing as well. There it is. So 40.7% now for the LNP. I think that may have crept up a little.
It has.
Since we last checked.
Not in the seats that matter, though.
No, but the
well,
38.2 for Labor, 8.4 Green, 5 for Palmer. Let's see what the swing therefore is. We've got about 70% of the vote counted. It's an 8.4% swing against the LNP, 11.3 to Labor. So it's bounced around a little bit, but still in that 11.5%.
I suspect, this is all guesswork at this point, but it looks more likely than not that Labor will end on 43, which is interesting because we assume that they will get one independent, but they would struggle to get both Katter Party representatives.
And that's assuming also that the two Katter Party people stick together.
Well, that's right. That's what I mean. We're in an interesting negotiating period if they do end on 43.
Well, we are, because what would the LNP then need? Both Katter Party plus Peter Wellington. Yep. And is that guaranteed? Is that possible?
I don't think it's possible to be definitive about that. I don't think it's possible to be too certain about what any of the three would do on these scenarios.
But it's an interesting point. If you have LNP 42, ALP 43...
it's very hard for the LNP at 42 to form government when you've got one seat less than Labor and you've had the landslide against you with all that momentum, I would have thought, and trying to grab that independent fellow. I don't know anything about him from what I hear.
Julia Gillard did it.
Well, she did from a smaller number of seats than Tony Abbott.
That worked out well.
Well, it didn't go well for the independents that went with her. I mean, they were basically sent to Coventry and wiped out. But look, you're right. If Labor get to 44 and they've got Wellington, then they're going to get there.
And let's go back. Let's find some relevance for the Sky News exit poll. Given just how many people thought that the LNP would win this election, you wonder how many people voted as a protest and have woken up now with regrets.
About 2/3. Oh, we're not talking about exit polls, but if we were, was about 2/3 thought that the LNP would win.
Which was lower than I would have expected. And by the way, those, as I said before, those polls have only been wrong once. In '99, the Victorian state election. Apart from that, they've been right.
This is the closest comparison to that.
They were wrong with the South Australian state election.
But this is the closest comparison to that '99 Victorian election in terms of the shock of the result.
How do you reckon Mike Baird's going to be feeling tonight? We've just seen Victoria go. We've now seen Queensland, if not go, then come.
Might fund Tony Abbott on a holiday.
I think Mike Baird will be feeling very sure that state elections depend on the issues in the particular state, and the result in the Queensland election, or that matter, the Victorian election, will have little or no bearing on the New South Wales election.
And do you think he'll be as confident about his electricity
that's the problem.
privatisation plans?
I think the issue of privatisation of public assets has a completely different complexion in Queensland.
Why is that?
Does in New South Wales. There are a lot of reasons for it, Michael. One reason always to remember about Queensland is it is, because of its very regional nature, people have a different attitude to infrastructure. They are less comfortable with infrastructure leaving public hands.
It's fascinating. I mean, if you can't... I mean, we had this debate in Australia 20 years ago about privatisation.
Well, New South Wales has had the debate every, 4 or 5 years with stunning regularity and stunningly similar results, rejecting it and rolling leaders over it on both sides.
I'm told in an interview, Jane Prentice, the Liberal MP federally, has refused to back Tony Abbott.
I've got 44.
There you go.
I didn't see it, but I'm told that by obviously another Liberal that's also not backing Tony Abbott.
Who was that?
That's why my phone is on this side of the desk.
I could do a lot of damage if I grabbed your phone and ran.
That's why I've got it here. And by the way, I've been deleting text messages.
I agree with George on the asset sales issue or the leasing, but don't underestimate the power of that in New South Wales. I agree that in Queensland, particularly because it's decentralised, people feel more vulnerable to it. But there is a belief, which won't be shaken, that if electricity assets are privatised, electricity prices will rise.
The other complicating factor in the privatisation debate is what those assets are going to be worth, whether you're actually going to get the sort of money for them in today's market to make it worthwhile for the taxpayer. And I know that was a bit of an issue for Campbell Newman.
It is a bit of an issue. I mean, I think Baird has articulated more clearly that the proceeds will be used on very tangible other assets. Now, that might soften it, but they still will not believe that electricity prices will stay where they are if assets are privatised.
Yeah.
It has been the case for 20 years.
And what about federally, Michael Kroger? Do you think this will spook the case for reform? This will put some fresh nervousness into those who do want to see IR reform, tax reform, those difficult things to prosecute.
Let's do account of the...
Look, of course it will, David, because any kind of electoral result like this, where you know, the leasing out or privatisation of assets was a massive issue, of course it does. And this is this is becoming a fundamental problem in this country, that we're basically... You know, we have massive problems. We know what they all are. But governments that want to enter into the reform agenda, they have got so many groups opposing them. I mean, you know, for every thing you want to do, there's 5 community groups opposing you. For every change you want to make, there are 5 demonstrations against you. The opponents of reform and change, who are essentially the left, have a wonderful communications mechanism. So whilst, take for example, education reforms are complex to explain, the left's thing is no cuts, no fees.
Can I ask you something, Michael Kroger?
For every change, there's a very simple slogan opposing it, and they're devastatingly effective.
The Liberal MP, Queensland Liberal MP federal, Jane Prentice, has described Tony Abbott's speech that he has to give on Monday as, quote, make or break. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't agree with that. No, I don't. But clearly there are lots of expectations. We've heard, you know, talk tonight about the paid parental leave scheme going.
So you can afford to put in a disappointing speech on Monday?
He can't afford to put in a disappointing speech. No, he can't. And he won't. No, but it's not make or break. No, he won't. He won't. But look, when you're 43 57 behind in the polls. Well, if you don't read that message, you know, you're in the wrong business. But the federal government gets the message, and they're going to make appropriate changes, and they need to, obviously.
I think we're seeing Anastasia Palaszczuk arriving there at the Labor venue, and she's going to be making, well, perhaps not a victory speech, but I would suggest a victorious speech, given the much better than expected results for her and the Labor team right across the state tonight. Campbell Newman's gone as Premier. He's gone from his seat of Ashgrove. Still unclear who is going to be able to form government. We won't know tonight, but we do know that Anastasia Palaszczuk has done far better than many expected and could well be in a position to become the next Premier of Queensland. It's a very different vibe, isn't it, to what we saw at the LNP function. About an hour ago, when Campbell Newman was there.
David, look, you have to say, you know, like or not, like a strategy or not, this is clearly a better result from Labor than anyone expected. Even if she doesn't get over the line and Labor loses, to get into the 40s is more than all of the pundits predicted.
Yep.
You know, starting with 9, if they got to 30, people thought 20 to 30 was the mark. Well, even if they've got to 30, that gives them 39. They've done a few seats better than that. So, you know, you'd be naive and foolish not to accept the fact that Labor have done better. And there are hard messages of that, very hard messages in relation to that for the coalition in terms of communicating, messaging, persuading the public about the need for reform. You know, Howard was brilliant at it, Hawke and Keating were brilliant at it, Costello was brilliant at it.
Well, that's from that too, by the way.
You need to be a very persuasive and great communicator in Australia today to get these messages through, because there's so much opposition to any change.
We should just list off what we do know from her campaign pitch, what the priorities are going to be, if indeed she does manage to form government. And clearly, if trust is the issue in politics today, which it certainly is, there's going to be no asset sale or lease for any time soon, unless it's quite specifically taken to the people of a future election. But that is well off the agenda. Jobs and training are going to be a big focus for Anastasia Palaszczuk if she becomes Premier. That was front and centre in her campaign, leveraging off what we were discussing earlier, the job cuts earlier in the term of the Newman government. We know on law and order she wants to review the anti-bikie laws. But that's not an area where Labor can afford to lose any ground. Hasn't been the dominant issue in this campaign, but can always turn around. In this speech, she'll pay some tribute, I would imagine, to Campbell Newman, but gee, it's that Labor team across the state, many former MPs coming back in tonight, and she'll be paying tribute to them, those who were there in the room as well. And what has been an effective campaign. I mean, this sort of result is quite remarkable.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I can just have your attention for a few seconds, I would just like to present to you tonight Anastasia Palaszczuk.
Certainly was. Who would have thought 3 years ago we would be making history tonight? It's still too close to call at present, but I'm very hopeful that we will be able to form government in this. the support has been absolutely overwhelming. As I've spent the last 3 years travelling right across Queensland, I am so humbled by the support that has been shown to me as I've met people from all walks of life. Queensland is an amazing state, a truly amazing state. But there are a few thank yous I do want to make tonight. First of all, I want to thank my amazing caucus team. My amazing caucus team. They have worked so hard. They have worked so hard each and every day, going beyond the call of duty. And tonight I want to pay special tribute to my Deputy Tim Mulheron, who is retiring. Thank you, Tim. And to Desley Scott, an amazing woman, Can I congratulate our new Labor members of Parliament? There's a lot more than 9. Can I also thank all of our Labor candidates who stood for us in this election? Can I thank the great Australian Labor Party? To Dick Williams, our party president, to Evan Moorhead, our state secretary, to Anthony Chisholm, our campaign director, and John Pursley. They have done an absolutely amazing job, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. To all of the branch members, all of the party members who stood on the polling booths out there, thank you so much. You've worked so hard. Can I thank the union movement? Because it is the union movement that stands up each and every day and fights for better conditions for workers right across this state. Amazing opposition staff headed by Angela McDonough, Lindsay, Marshall, Peter Nips, Jackie Hughes, and a big thank you to Chris and Brendan who travelled with me during this campaign. A big thank you to my Inala electorate for once again community we have out here. We do it tough, but we stand up and we get things done. I have to mention my amazing family, and I know my grandmother is here tonight somewhere. Hello, Nana. And can I thank, most importantly, the people of Queensland who have put their trust back into the Labor Party. Can I also give a big congratulations to Kate Jones? Friends for many years, and congratulations, Kate. But I also, on a very serious note, want to wish Campbell Newman and his wife, Lisa, and their family all the very best for their future. Over the last 3 years, I've been travelling across Queensland listening to Queenslanders. We will continue to listen to you. That is my You have put your trust back into the Labor Party, and my promise tonight is I will value that trust. I will value that trust each and every day. But today the people of Queensland sent a very clear message, and that message was they do not want their assets sold. And we will keep our assets in public hands for the future and future generations. Finally, I want to unite Queensland. I want to bring Queensland back together. Let's put the past 3 years behind us. Let's have a consensus government where we bring people together, where we listen and where we unite. And tomorrow, we begin a brand new chapter in Queensland's history. Thank you.
Well, jubilant Anastasia Palaszczuk there, stopping short of claiming victory, but I think she said very hopeful Labor will form government. And on the count, and we've been just crunching some numbers while she's been talking there, Craig Emerson, you'd have to say Labor is far more likely now to form government, either in minority or majority.
Now, I repeat, Labor on 44.
You're saying at least 44.
Yeah,
45 being the number you need for a
No,
majority.
they're at least 43, but they could be 44.
Labor on 44.
They won't be 45.
Sorry?
I don't think they will be 45. I mean, I've been...
Well, let me just let Craig go through his numbers.
I know the figures. Labor on 44, Katter Australia Party 2, Peter Wellington 1, LNP 42. So Labor just needs one of the three independents to have a majority.
And the difference between you saying 44 for Labor and Peter, you saying 43 is Maryborough, which is still very, very close.
Labor 700 ahead.
Labor is apparently 700 votes ahead in the latest
If they're 700 ahead, they won't lose.
The 700 gets them, the 700 gets them to 44.
Yeah.
But my point is that I don't see them getting to 45.
Well, they only get to 45 if they win one of Whitsunday or Mansfield.
Which I don't see them
I think it's unlikely.
If we agree they get 44,
I think it's unlikely they'll win either, but there's a possibility they could.
But even on 44, they form government, minority government, with Peter Wellington, the independent.
Assuming that the independent
goes their way.
And
Now, this is an
you've got
independent
the
who's
force
backed
of the
Labor before.
argument that Labor's got 44 seats, the LNP's got 42 seats.
Yep.
Without being presumptuous, the LNP always takes on Peter Wellington in Nicklin. Labor gives Peter Wellington...
Can we all agree about one thing? Forget Queensland specifically for a minute. Australian politics has changed such that we can now dismiss this notion that there's no point in being a first-term opposition leader.
Correct.
Victoria, Queensland, and at the moment, the way it's going federally, Bill Shorten.
Yep, correct.
I think we can now just dismiss that as
another
an
article
old,
of faith.
antiquated idea.
Yep, that's right.
And just to spell out the position the LNP are in, if they do get Whitsunday and Mansfield, they end up on 42. That's right. They would therefore need not just Peter Wellington, the independent, plus two Katter MPs.
If those figures are right.
Well, that's really unthinkable, isn't it?
They need to get to 43. Obviously, they've got to get to 43.
The worst case scenario now, you would think for Labor, is that they need the independent and one of the Katter Party personnel. But even that's unlikely.
Yeah, I think they're only going to need Peter
if
Wellington.
they lose Maryborough.
And yet that means they've got to lose 700 votes.
700 up,
unlikely.
George.
So
pretty hard to see that
Big
sort of
number.
number
That's a
going
big
down.
number.
So this is the most extraordinary night I've ever witnessed. When we went down to 7 seats, Anthony Chisholm, the party secretary, and who has done so well this time, was the campaign director last time, which probably he won't want to put on his CV. I spoke to him on the day before. He said we will be lucky to get 10 seats. So I expected the result. Bad as it was, I expected it. Tonight, I predicted that Labor would win 28 seats, which would have taken Labor to 37. And I thought I was being pretty optimistic. I did not think they'd get the extra 5 or 6. This is a phenomenal
With the
result.
exception of Craig Emerson, you're all laughing at me earlier in the night when I had the temerity to suggest they might be in a position
we didn't
where
laugh
it's
at
100.
you. We were just
You
doubtful.
threatened to kiss me.
I'm going to carry out the threat very, very shortly.
Why do you think the people are still watching? Why do you think our viewers are still
Let's go off air.
I want to get some final thoughts
I've
from you.
become a pumpkin at midnight. I'm out of here.
There's apparently a photo I've got to show you. What's this one? It's a... Oh, OK, Sunday Mail. We've got another front page. This is the latest update from them. Massacre. They're not wrong about that. And a smiling Anastasia Palaszczuk. Let's go to David Lipson and Brooke Wiley, who are there at the Labor function tonight. And we saw at the LNP function, they cleared out pretty quick after the speech. I reckon they'll be there for a while yet.
No chance that anything different will happen in regards to that, David. People seem to be very much locked in here for the long haul, the long celebration. Anastasia Palaszczuk still in the room, still doing the rounds, still having fun with her family. Her father and her grandmother are both here, and all her loyal supporters. What an incredible journey it's been for her, not just this campaign, but over the past 3 years. You were speaking about the 7 members of the Labor Party that were remaining back then. Now she is seemingly on the cusp of forming government in one way or another. As one Labor insider said to me, he would expect that the Qatar Australia Party members, if it came to a hung parliament, would side with Labor. That would almost certainly be enough to get them over the line. But we will see. Those negotiations will come. Brooke, what an amazing night it's been. It must have been an amazing journey to watch it through the campaign as well.
Yeah, it certainly was. In those early weeks of the campaign, there was a lot of talk about how the LNP might have caught Labor off guard by calling an early summer election. This is obviously not eventuated. There were a lot of insiders who thought that Labor would be starting this campaign on the wrong...
Brooke, I'm going to interrupt. Anastasia Palaszczuk, you're live on Sky. How do you feel?
Oh, very humbled. It's a very humbling experience today, but very happy that the people of Queensland have put their trust back into Labor.
Are you going to form government, do you think?
We'll see.
There you have it.
Thanks, guys.
Very, very happy woman.
Yeah, absolutely, and rightly so. Thank you both very much for some great coverage there, and even snaring the woman I feel we can say is most likely now to become the new Queensland Premier. No one's shaking their head at that, so we'll take that as a... We're going to get some final thoughts from everyone before we wrap it up. Well, Craig Emerson, I've got to give you credit as well, because you were first out of the blocks amongst us all to say that a minority government was in real prospect, and even potentially a majority, and you said that fairly early in the night.
There was a bit of ridicule around, but that happens, I suppose. Look, I think I've known Anastasia Palaszczuk since she was 18. She has always worked hard. She is a very, very committed person. She's a very decent person. I know her father, Henry Palaszczuk, who was a minister in the Goss and Beattie governments. Congratulations to them. Finally, if people still persist with the view that there are no federal implications in this, I want to congratulate them, and I hope they believe that all the way through to the next election.
George Brandis, I'll come back to your final thoughts in a moment. Let's get a close-up over here if we can. Now, if you have only joined us in the last hour...
It has to happen.
You missed this.
It has to happen.
No. Turn around, Peter.
No, that'll do.
Turn around, bright eyes. Turn around, bright eyes.
What's going on? David,
Regrets I've had a few.
That life has come to this.
It's not just because the two of them get on very well. There was Richard did say much earlier that should Labor get to 40 seats.
Can I offer my quick view about this? I've spent the entire campaign on my nightly show laughing about the fact that I couldn't pronounce Anastasia Palaszczuk's last name, but saying, who cares, because by the end of the month I won't need to ever bother. Well, total mea culpa on that one. Glad I learnt it before the end.
George Brandis, what is the takeout for you tonight?
I think that it shows that, as you were saying a moment ago, David, that our politics are much more volatile than they ever were before. I don't say there are no federal implications, because, of course, there'll be discussion about the consequences of this at the federal level, but I do say, and I think most have agreed with me, that this election was not fought on federal issues and did not turn on federal issues. The Labor Party obviously should be congratulated on the campaign that they fought, and Anastasia Palaszczuk deserves to be congratulated on a much stronger showing than anybody expected of her. Campbell Newman, I think, should also be congratulated on his courage and, as we saw tonight, on his grace and his dignity.
We haven't got much time left.
I'll be very quick. I think we learn one lesson out of tonight, and that is that when you make a promise, you must keep it. The electorate in this era will never forgive broken promises. That is the lesson out of tonight. Anastasia Palaszczuk has done brilliantly, so has a campaign team led by Anthony Chisholm. I am gobsmacked, but I have not been happier in a long time. What a great night.
Michael.
Far too complimentary of the Labor leadership and the Labor campaign. The truth of the matter is governments lose elections in this country, and the Newman government lost this election on its own. It didn't have much help from Labor, and the federal government didn't play much of a role. The bottom line is this started to go south when they got rid of all those public sector jobs, and it never got any better. You don't sell a message, you don't communicate a message, you don't persuade the electorate, you don't take them with you, you're in serious trouble, and that's what happened tonight.
Peter?
Well, I think the federal implications are real. I think it only takes as much as 1 in 100 voters to have changed their mind because of it, and that cost the Liberal National Party a re-election. But certainly state issues were predominant. To say there's no federal issues or implications in this is to deny the absolute bleeding obvious. Of course there are.
An extraordinary result for Queensland. The volatility of Queensland politics well and truly on show. But yes, federal implications, that's for sure. Yes. And not just for leadership, but for policy as well. Reform is hard, and we've seen a government pay the price, at least in part, for that tonight. Thank you for your company. Thank you all for being here tonight on what we all agree has been a pretty amazing night. Not one that we expected. There you go. We've got another state election coming up in New South Wales very soon, and who knows what's going to happen in the federal sphere. So do stay with us on Sky News. Back with more right after this.